just got out of theaters from seeing him on the big screen. I have some things that I want to talk about for this movie, guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the movie review. Let's go. Is a new horror movie directed by Justin Tipping that stars Tyriq Withers as the character of Cameron Cade. Cade is a rising quarterback who suffers a potential career-ending injury after being attacked by an unhinged fan. Just when all seems lost, Cam receives a lifeline when his hero, Isiah White, offers to train him at an isolated compound. However, as the training accelerates, Isiah's charisma turns into something darker, sending Cam down a disorienting rabbit hole that may cost him more than he ever bargained for. Now, of course, the main name that caught my attention with this film is that of Jordan Peele, because he is the producer of this film, not the director as many people seem to think he is. Hell, even I thought he was at the very start and announcement of this movie. It's his name that they used on all the promotional material because he is known for making cult classic films. He has 3 under his belt now, and they're all excellent. So, of course, leading into this movie, with Jordan Peele's name tied to this film, it built up a lot of hype just off that alone. But what really made this one of my most highly anticipated films this year was the initial trailer that I seen for this film, where we see images of celebrity, fame, and more so occultism, which is what really drawed me to this film and made me want to watch this film. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with my positives for the Him movie. And for my first positive with this movie, I want to talk about the concept, because that is really the selling point here for this film. This up and coming football star who is lined up to be the next guy in the spotlight, the next GOAT of the sport, which we'll talk about that more later in this review, what that actually hints towards. But him getting into this life of professional football, the NFL, all eyes are on him. He couldn't be more excited. This is every kid's dream and was specifically his dream since he was a child, and what seemingly everything in his life has been pushing him towards. But once he gets there, he comes to find out that things are not what they seem, and there happens to be this cult at the top of this professional football league that he is just getting more and more wrapped up into. A genius concept, brilliant idea that if they just executed properly, we can end up getting what I like to call a modern day cult classic. Now, does that exactly happen? Well, we'll talk about that later in the review, but just off the concept alone, it's brilliant. I love the idea they pitched here. Now let's talk about more of what this movie has to offer. Let's move into my next positive with this film, and it would have to be our 2 main lead actors, Tyriq Withers and Marlon Wayans. Of course, Tyriq is playing the up and coming college kid who's just getting into the league. He's playing Cameron Cade, the quarterback that everyone is looking forward to see him perform in the league. And then Marlon Wayans is of course playing Isiah White, this GOAT of the sport that is football. For instance, you could swap his character out for Tom Brady if you want an idea of what this character is supposed to represent, especially with the many championship rings that this character possesses and has. And I gotta say, both these guys do an amazing job with the script and the material that they were given here. They made this movie come more to life and really provide a lot of what this movie has to offer in general. Now, I say that because when we get into the negatives, I want to make it clear that it is not on these 2 gentlemen here for why this movie went in the wrong direction. And now let's move into more positives that I had with this film, such as the symbolism and the occultism that is implemented into this movie, because for me, that is the most interesting and intriguing part of this entire film. If you're into any conspiracy theories, you know, Illuminati, Freemasonry, anything like this, and there's a lot here that this movie offers. Now, of course, with all of this occult imagery comes religious imagery, religious symbolism, but also demonic, satanic imagery and symbolism. Now, this is all wrapped up here and kind of all works as one. For instance, you see images of triangles, you know, the all-seeing eye that's on the back of the dollar bill, cubes, which goes into Saturn worship, and all of these other things. Now, I want you to go ahead and do your own research on a lot of these topics. I'll just be giving you, you know, the bare bones required for watching this movie and understanding this film on a deeper level. But the most important thing to understand is that all of this ties in at the end of the day to the worship of Lucifer, the worship of Satan, the Baphomet. I'm going to provide an image on the screen for you now so you can understand the image that I'm referencing of the Baphomet. This is one of the most common images associated with Satan and the worship of Satan through these different cults. What I want you to notice about this image is the fact that the Baphomet has a goat head. Now, you're going to see where I'm going with this now. The term goat is used constantly throughout the advertisement for this film, but also throughout this film in general, of course, meaning greatest of all time. We commonly use this saying in a lot of sports talk or other talks in general. You know, GOAT is a very common saying. Hell, even I use this saying quite a lot. Now, the reason that this is important is because constantly throughout this film they are doing double speak, and of course, while referring to the GOAT, you could also be referring to the Baphomet, as shown in the image that I provided for you. And what's also important about that image is, of course, the hand symbols that he's using, the as above, so below, while also representing a hermaphroditic form inside of that image. Again, go do all your own research on a lot of these words that I'm saying, and you'll go down a very deep rabbit hole that is either going to intrigue you or scare the hell out of you. Now, all of this is important for this film because this movie touches on it a lot. It makes a lot of hints and references towards this. A lot of the imagery that they use throughout this film hints and pushes you towards this direction. And the main plot of this film in general is sort of wrapped around this. So if you end up seeing this movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I hope I've helped you understand it better if you weren't already familiar with these concepts. Now, I think they do a great job in this film implementing and including this and making this movie feel more occultic. However, it is still not done as well as to the level as something like a Midsommar, one of my favorite cult films of all time. If you haven't seen that film, make sure you go check out Midsommar. But moving on to my final positive with this movie, it would have to be the first act. I actually think the first act was done very well inside of this film. You know, it sets up its premise, it sets up its initial concept, it provides you information with who Cameron Cade is and who he's trying to become and wants to be, his hero Isiah White. It sets up his head injury, which in a way could be a call to CTE existing within the world of football and almost a commentary on that, although it doesn't go into it too much. And from that point on, I was on board with this movie. I was intrigued. I couldn't wait to see how it would turn out. Even with all the bad reviews it's been receiving, it managed to get me on board, and I couldn't have been more interested leading into that second and third act. Now, how do those other acts end up going? Well, we'll address it very soon as we move over into my negatives for the Him movie. And for my first negative with this film, I want to talk about the execution, because like I said, it has a great concept but a very poor execution of that concept, and it really misses the mark here. It leaves you feeling disappointed at what could have been of this movie, but you don't exactly get it here. And while the introduction is great, while you getting to know these characters and getting into this world is great, this really doesn't go deeper than the surface level with all of these topics, all of these subjects that I'm discussing. The reaction that Cameron Cade is having to all of these events that's happening to him feel very uncharacteristic and unrealistic to someone who grew up in a religious household and home, and should at the very least have a baseline understanding at what he is entering into and getting involved with. And when things really start going off the rails here, right in front of this character's eyes, he sort of just accepts it and continues going along with it. It felt very strange. It felt like an unnatural thing for this character to be doing, especially when you consider that the audience themselves is in a way Tyriq Withers, because we are being introduced into this world of football, celebrity, fame, professional football at the highest level with Cameron Cade. You know, we're going along that journey with him. So in a way, he represents the audience until we get to see his reactions to these events. And then you realize this is very uncharacteristic to how a lot of the audience would be reacting if they were put into these situations and scenarios. Now, let's touch on another negative I had here, and that would be the ambiguity of this film. This film drowns in its own ambiguity. When you're watching this film, it is all ambiguous. If you weren't already previously familiar with a lot of the symbolism and occultism that I previously referenced in the positive section, you would pretty much have no idea at all what is going on inside of this film for a majority of this movie. And even when it does reveal what is happening, even when it does finally, you know, bring it to the surface and touch on it and just let the audience know what exactly is happening here, it's still not a satisfying conclusion, even though that was the clear end result that was going to happen. And like I said, amongst this journey that you go on, this film is overly ambiguous to the point where it gets lost in itself. And that would move us over into another negative that I had with this film, and that would be how over the top it is. This film is so over the top that it gets to the point in the second and especially the end of this movie, the third act, that it is laughable. I couldn't even see this as a horror movie anymore. By the third act, this film turned into a straight up comedy. And from my understanding, nowhere under where this genre is listed does it say that this is supposed to be a satirical comedy by any means. But that is exactly what this movie feels like. It turns into that classic saying of so bad it's good, to the point where I'm just having a great time laughing laughing at how ridiculous this movie has gotten, especially when it seems that they have taken themselves so seriously up to a certain point and then they just kind of let that go completely, and it almost feels like this movie is just laughing at itself at times, which just felt bizarre and out of left field. And that brings us to my final negative with this film, which is, of course, the script. This script needed to be revised a couple times here because, like I said, a genius idea, but just not fleshed out properly. This movie needed more time in the oven. It needed more time in the kitchen. Let it cook a little bit more. Let's revise some of the plot lines here. Let's flesh out these concepts a lot more here so that this idea can fully come to fruition inside of this film, which sadly it never does. And quite honestly, after getting to the end of this film, it simply felt like they needed 25-30 more minutes of footage. It felt like a bunch was cut out of this movie, and if we ended up getting that, it would have really flushed out everything that they were trying to do here. And with that being said, let's just move into my overall review for the movie Him. Guys, this movie on paper should have been a modern day cult classic. It should have been something that we were able to watch for years and years to come and just have all of this deep meaning and understanding here. They had something so special on their hands with this film and they squandered it, they ruined it, they blew it. And as a fan of movies like this, as someone who has gone down these rabbit holes, looked into all of this different, areas of symbolism and occultism, I couldn't have been more disappointed with the end result that we got with this movie. It's sad to say because Marlon Wayans does a fantastic job here with Isiah White. Tyriq Withers does a really good job here as the main character with what he was given for Cameron Cade, but this script just failed these two actors tremendously. It's overly ambiguous to the point where it almost loses all meaning that it has in general. And while I did like and appreciate certain elements of this film, especially when it pertains to that of the cult that exists within inside this movie and how they operate exactly how a cult operates. They get you wrapped up in this idea that they're presenting to you. They drug the person that they're trying to introduce. They groom them in preparation for what's to come later. And all of these other playbooks that cults like to go by that is present within inside this film and is really a majority of the value that you're going to get out of this movie. In the end, it ends up failing itself. And really the most disappointing part is that this is just a missed opportunity overall. And at its best, we can call this movie a so bad it's good to the point where it's comical, it's laughable, and really that's all the value you're gonna get here out of this film. So with that being said, guys, let's drop my official rating for the movie Him. If I had to rate this film, I would give it a 5 out of 10. It gets the 5 out of 10. Do I think it's as bad as people have been saying? No, I don't. I think they had so many great concepts to work with here that really just didn't have time to flourish and really flesh out its ideas. And honestly, if Jordan Peele wasn't just a producer on this film, if they gave him, that director position, gave him this script, let him revise it, I think we could have had a cult classic on our hands here. But sadly, with this end result, my disappointment is immeasurable with this film. I cannot in good conscience recommend that you spend your hard-earned money and go check this film out at the theaters by any means. I would say wait to watch it at home if you're interested in seeing this film whatsoever. And with that being said, guys, those are my thoughts on this film. I'd love to know your thoughts on this movie down in the comment section down below. And if you don't know what we do here on Demigod ENT, we do film, TV, and anime based content. So if you're interested in any of this type of content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.